the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, primetime Deion Sanders says, "Give me my theme music." On this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, I want to talk about Saquon Barkley, superstar running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, who I think is a shoo-in to be Offensive Player of the Year. I don't think there's any question about that. Real quick, so he's obviously, as we know, 101 yards away, rushing yards away from breaking a 40-year record. Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing record for a single season in the NFL. 101 yards away, Saquon had 1 game to go in a 17-game season to break it. It was announced that he, as well as other notable Philadelphia Eagles starters, will sit. Take a listen. Before we get into my take a listen to what Saquon Barkley said yesterday. This is from the Philadelphia Eagles YouTube account. Take a listen to Saquon.
So what was your reaction to finding out you're not going to play on Sunday?
Yeah, Coach asked me, what I like to do. We had a conversation, and he called me back, let me know that we're probably going to be resting, and my reaction was kind of like I told my family. Obviously, my family, probably wanted a little bit more than me. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is winning football games, and we're in the playoffs. So I got a bigger goal in mind anyway.
I've been really critical of Nick Sirianni, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, for some time. And I still have a healthy level of skepticism about, do I trust him in close games against the likes of Detroit, Minnesota, heck, Tampa. Tampa's really had Philadelphia's number in recent years. Do I trust him? Not really. With that said, got to give credit where credit's due. Got to keep it real while I can. Bravo. Bravo. Nick Sirianni for seeing the bigger picture. We all love sports here. We have some preferences over others. I like the NBA more than Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball is on kind of a somewhat of a comeback as of late, which is awesome to see because baseball is my first love as a sport. But I just prefer the NBA better. I prefer basketball better over baseball. Some people disagree. People have their preferences. Okay, there's tennis and there's golf. I prefer golf over tennis, and some people vice versa. We all have our preferences, but there's a reason the NFL's king. Even over college football, over the NBA, Major League Baseball, WNBA, college, March Madness, there's a reason the NFL's king. Is that for all the narratives and all the discussions about MVPs, about records, we all play fantasy football, many Americans gamble on the games, for all that stuff that goes on, all the same thing, by the way, which apply to other sports. You know what differentiates the NFL? Pretty darn simple. We really only just care about, did you win or not? Did you win or did you lose? That's how we view the NFL in a very unique prism relative to other team sports, at least here in the United States of America. I'm not tuning up well enough to hockey to know. But in basketball, we do have a tendency, I can be as guilty of this as anybody, to give a superstar a pass if they lose. Like it's like, hey, if you play well. What's always the big knock? Dan Marino's a prime example. Dan Marino is one of the 5 most gifted quarterbacks to ever play the game. Ever. One of the greatest prospects we've seen come out of college, out of Pitt in 1984. All-time great talent. But anytime you bring up Dan Marino, it's always, man, Dan can sling it. Yeah, you just don't really remember any big playoff wins. Now, was that always his fault? No, but he does bear some responsibility for that. For years, Peyton Manning, man, was winning MVPs, dominating the regular season, best quarterback in football. Like, it was always the narrative was, yeah, Brady, and this was an absurd narrative, but Brady, he's the system quarterback. He needs the defense and Belichick and efficiency and all that. And Peyton goes out there and sets records. But up until he got the monkey off his back in 2006 with the Colts, he was always, yeah, but Peyton can't win the big one. Can't trust Peyton. Today, Lamar Jackson's Peyton Manning. MVPs, historic seasons, and we don't trust him come playoff time. And that's the thing that hangs over Lamar's head more than anything. I mean, I have to beg. I mean, I had for years, use an NBA example, I have for years been saying, can we put a little bit more heat on Joel Embiid for not even getting to a conference finals and continuously coming up short in big closeout games in the second round? Can we at some point, finally, it still feels like people are starting to come to that. I've been banging that drum for years. to a certain degree, Aaron Judge. But baseball, it is not that winning doesn't matter, because it obviously does. And there's certain organizations where winning means more. The Yankees, the Dodgers, two teams we saw in the World Series, my Red Sox, the St. Louis Cardinals, certain franchises, to use the SEC's term, it just means more. Baseball's primarily a record sport. It primarily is. I mean, we get so wrapped up with baseball records that if we feel like they've been infringed upon in any way, shape, or form, i.e. the steroids era, despite the fact that Barry Bonds was awesome before the steroids, obviously steroids made it better, but he was amazing before that, the majority of baseball fans do not call Barry Bonds the home run king. I do, because my thing is, record book says he is. Barry was a great player before the steroids. I'm going to give it to Barry. Majority of baseball fans now say it's Aaron Judge. Past Roger Maris 2 years ago, I remember that was a great moment. Not even a Yankees fan. Hate the Yankees. I'm a Red Sox guy, but respect Aaron Judge. Respect the AL single season record. But people rip McGuire, rip Sammy Sosa, despite the fact that they saved the sport, because people thought they'd infringed upon the records. Nobody really talks about this ever. There was a play 3 seasons ago with my man TJ Watt of my Pittsburgh Steelers, where he probably, I forget if it was the last game of the season or one of the last games of the 2021 season, when he was chasing down the legendary Michael Strahan's single season sack record. I remember there was a play that was brought up on Twitter when something had been discussed about TJ, and it was like, TJ probably should have gotten this half sack, and therefore TJ Watt would be the single season sack record king, topping Strahan. But no one really cares about that, because when people think TJ Watt, we're like, man, he dominates, and man, we'd love to see him in a big game at some point. You know, it would be nice if the Steelers could win a playoff game for once. Saquon Barkley, and more importantly, the Philadelphia Eagles saw the bigger picture, and this is why they're one of the most well-run franchises. I can hate the Eagles all I want. They're one of the most well-run franchises in professional sports, from Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, to arguably the best GM in the sport, Howie Roseman. Nick Sirianni, I've been critical of. This was the right call, because one thing, too, that people aren't taking into account, people that think Saquon should have played, should have gone after the record. Well, you know what Philadelphia would have had to do? Play their offensive linemen. They would have to play guys like Lane Johnson, who's a veteran, who's played a long time in this league. And Lane Johnson, after the game against Dallas on Sunday, where the Eagles wrapped up the division in the 2 seed, he's like, man, I could use the week off. You know, it'd be nice to be fresh. And by the way, does any position group, or groups rather, take more of a physical pounding than linemen? Offensive and defenses, I mean, it's just, you are moving another grown arse man, 300 pounds, against his will for 3.5 hours, gonna take a toll on your body. Lane Johnson's an older player. He's like, man, I could use a rest like before the playoffs. We're trying to go to a Super Bowl here. Philadelphia saw the bigger picture. It's about Super Bowls here. Like, we've only got one Super Bowl in history. We won it, I guess that would have been 7 seasons ago. Like, we want to continue to maintain that standard with a great owner, great GM, elite roster, solid coaching staff. We want to maintain that standard. It's not about records. Listen, would it have been cool for Saquon to get it? Yeah, but Saquon did. It's not like Saquon got the raw deal in this. You don't get the raw deal? The Giants. And by the way, they did it to themselves. Saquon Barkley leaves, rushes for 2,000. And by the way, is he not one of the easiest guys to root for in the National Football League? Humble, works his arse off, competes 100%, 100 miles an hour every single game. Saquon Barkley does not need a record to define his greatness. If he does, maybe he wasn't great enough, which that's not the case, because he is amazing. Look what he's doing behind the Philadelphia offensive line. That's been elite, seems like my whole life. And so I give so much credit to Philadelphia for understanding that people will remember Saquon Barkley breaking the single season rusher record from Eric Dickerson. By the way, anyone that would have tried to poo-poo that just because he got an extra game than Dickerson, he has 34 less carries as we sit here today through 16 games. So it would have been perfectly legitimate. He would have gotten it on less attempts. With that being said, people remembered it, but if Philly goes out in round 2 to, Tampa or the Rams or somebody, it's like, yeah, cool, he got the record. Fell short again with a loaded roster. What's up with Jalen Hurts? Is Lane Johnson going to retire? Sirianni, is he in the hot seat? Like, if you could ask anybody, including Saquon himself, You want a Super Bowl ring? You want the record? It's unanimous. And that's what makes the NFL great. It's not that these other sports don't care about winning, because they obviously do. You play to win the game, as the great Herm Edwards said. That's sports. You play to win the game. But the NFL, winning is absolutely paramount at all costs. Long term, seeing the bigger picture, looking ahead, not just living the here and now. We live in very much a here and now. The last thing that happened is the most important thing that happened, and the most important thing that ever will happen just happened. That's the society we live in. Would like to see us maybe at some point get away from that starting this new year in 2025, but that's what we live in. Philadelphia went the opposite direction, and I commend them for it. So this week's edition of Carving Up the Context, shout out to the Philadelphia Eagles for seeing the bigger picture. Listen, and I said on Monday, by the way, I was like, I kind of like to see him go for the record. I want to see history, but I'm a fan. I'm darn sure not an Eagles fan, but I do like witnessing history. It's why I love dynasties, why I enjoy watching Kansas City. I love watching history. But Philly's like, yeah, we want to make a different kind of history that's going to be remembered for all time. Saquon Barkley's record may eventually get broken. Like Eric Dickerson's record was almost broken. People always remember that Super Bowl. Can't take that away from us ever. So shout out to the Philadelphia Eagles for their decision-making in their front office. And from Nick Sirianni as well, by the way. I mean, this is the Eagles brass coming together, understanding what the mindset was coming into the season and not deviating away from that. This is Super Bowl or bust. We have one of the best rosters in the sport. I think probably number 2 right behind Detroit. Minnesota's in that ballpark as well. They don't have quite as much talent defensively as Philly does. That's just a Brian Flores job with the Minnesota Vikings in terms of what their success on that side. But they've got all the components to win it. They almost did win it a couple of seasons ago. That's the mindset, and the Eagles aren't deviating from that. Major, major, major respect. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.